Maybe it's just me, or maybe not if you're watching this video, but I've always wondered, how did the enslaved care for their hair during American chattel slavery? Yes, I know hair was not priority, but caring for your scalp is vital because if it's not cleaned properly, it could lead to possible diseases and pests. We know most of the horrors the transatlantic slave trade created. I made a video about how our hair was used as cotton to stuff furniture. This was one of the many acts done to dehumanize the Africans. Please watch my video, The Horrific Truth About How Enslaved Africans' Hair and Skin Was Used. Before our ancestors were captured from their native land, hair held spiritual and social significance. This is partly why many Black people call out cultural appropriation when it comes to Black hairstyles. The unfortunate events of history stripped away more than freedom from Africans. It diminished their practices, spirituality, and knowledge of self. So much so that many of us, the descendants, whether it's intentional or subconsciously, are trying hard to hold on to what we can to just be a little spiritually closer to our ancestors. So to say it's just hair when we have to fight to have the right to wear our hair as it grows out our scalp, or wear traditionally Black hairstyles such as braids, twists, and locks is not only rude and unempathetic of Black history, it's a slap in the face to our ancestors whose culture and identity were stolen from them, which included their hair. The primary West and Central African societies that filled the slave ships that sailed to the New World were the Wolof, Mende, Mandinka, and Yoruba people. Within these cultures, hair was an intrinsic part of a complex language system and was also aesthetically significant. Ever since African civilizations bloomed, hairstyles have been used to indicate a person's marital status, age, religion, ethnic identity, wealth, and rank within the community. For example, in the Wolof culture of Senegal, young girls who were not old enough to get married would have partly shaved heads to demonstrate that she was not of age to be courted. It is common in most West African cultures for widows to wear their hair undone during their mourning period to look unattractive to the opposite sex. A style known as Kohin Sorogon was worn by polygamous Nigerian housewives to taunt their husbands' other wives. Traditionally, leaders of the community wore the most elaborate hairstyles. All of this was erased when the slave trade started and Africans were forced to slavery. To humiliate and attempt to dehumanize them, their hair was shaved off. This was the first step of many to eradicate any sense of culture, identity, and pride of the people. Fast forward to living on the plantations. Styles such as braids became less intricate and more practical and functional. Braids were worn because it was a style that could last for weeks while working. It is said that cornrows served as maps for those escaping to freedom. Of course, there isn't any solid proof of that claim, and it's pretty much based on oral accounts. But it's not too far-fetched, as many African societies were nomadic and were innovative and creative and resourceful. In countries such as Colombia, hair braiding was used to relay messages. For example, to signal that they wanted to escape, women would braid a hairstyle called departes. It had thick, tight braids, braided closely to the scalp, and was tied into buns on the top. And another hairstyle had curved braids tightly braided on their heads. The curved braids would represent the roads they would use to escape. In the braids, they also kept gold and hid seeds, which in the long run helped them survive after they escaped. We have to remember, most couldn't read or write and relied on oral communication to keep the slave owners from finding out. So let's not close our minds to the possibility of these accounts. The enslaved did not have the tools they had back in Africa, such as hand-carved wooden combs with long, wide teeth and rounded ends used to detangle the hair. Instead, they used a sheep fleece carding tool to groom their hair. Although this seems like a resourceful way to make do with what they had, the tool often carried lice and ringworm. Scalp infections were common and often left their scalp patchy. As a result, women started wearing their head wraps. The head wraps protected their hair but was worn out of shame due to the conditions of their hair and scalp. In the 1800s, the Tignon law was passed in Louisiana, which banned women of color from wearing their hair in public. Please be sure to check out the video I did on that subject. Since African slaves no longer had access to their natural herbs, butters, and oils to take care of their hair, they resorted to bacon grease, butter, and kerosene as their moisturizers, conditioners, and shampoos. Centuries down the line, when the slave trade was abolished, the enslaved were able to attend church on Sundays. This was the day they were able to dress up and show up in their Sunday's best. They would style their hair and share tips such as using coffee and axle grease as natural hair dyes. A New England-born traveler in the early 1830s describes his visit to a Mississippi plantation on Sabbath morning as lively. In every cabin, the men are shaving and dressing. The women, arrayed in their gay muslins, are arranging their frizzy hair, in which they take no little pride, or investigating the conditions of their children's head. Black people did the best they could with what they knew and were allowed to have. Black people were dehumanized and their hair seen as unattractive. Unfortunately, for some, that still holds true today. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for loving and taking pride in your hair. Its significance is part of our culture, and through cultural traditions and possibly some type of transgenerational inheritance, we still partake in some of the techniques and styles, even if it's more about aesthetics now. Do you know of any other methods the enslaved Africans may have used to care for their hair? Are there any hairstyles that are significant in your culture? Share your thoughts in the comments. Also, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like, and share this video. Thank you.